Hi, welcome back to the Go Draft, elevating your screenwriting to the next level. I'm Andy Guerdat. I'm sharing with you my techniques and thoughts on screen and television writing, uh, accumulated over 45 years as a working writer. Today, in this particular episode, we're going to be discussing the thing that all beginning writers want to hear about most, I guess, as opposed to, say, working really hard. And that is, how do you break in? Um, Let me start by saying this. Somebody once had an analogy I thought was really good. They said breaking into the entertainment industry is like you're hacking your way through a jungle in Central America somewhere, trying to get to the top of a Mayan pyramid, and you can just barely see it in the distance above the foliage. And you're hacking through this dense vegetation over streams and rocks and hills, and then finally you get to the base of the pyramid and you climb your way to the top and you look back to see which way you came so you can tell other people how to do it, but by then the jungle has grown back and the path that you hacked through the jungle has disappeared, so you can't share it with anybody. That's pretty much what Hollywood is. There is no way to do it. There is no one way to do it. There is no right way to do it. There is no system in place with which to do it. What little there used to be is long gone. And so everybody I know who's had any success has come by it in a slightly different way, and often in a very different way. The best way I can do this is just tell you stories. Start out that way anyway, starting with mine. I came out to Hollywood in 1976 in August, and I knew absolutely no one in the business. Not only did I not know anyone in the business, I didn't know anyone west of the Mississippi River. My family didn't have a cousin who had a best friend who once knew the uncle of the janitor at Paramount. I mean, I didn't know anybody. And I came out, I went to a little film school I happened upon called Sherwood Oaks Experimental College, which doesn't exist anymore. It was sort of a hippy-dippy film school. And I took writing, directing, and acting classes and learned an enormous amount and met a lot of people. I started working with a partner who I met there at the school. We started writing together TV scripts just to try it out. And within about a year, we got an agent. And how do we get an agent? In those days, before the internet, we made 50 Xerox copies of our spec MASH, which we had written, which was a hot script to write at the time, and some other material as well. We made 50 copies, put them in envelopes, got a list from the Writers Guild of all the signatory agencies who would be willing to read something over the transom, and sent it to all of them, and to some who said they wouldn't read it, we sent it to them anyway. Out of the 50 agents we sent it to, 2 responded positively. We took the better of the 2, and then we started getting work soon after that. That's my story. It is exactly the same as nobody's. I have a friend who, and these are more recent stories, who labored in the vineyards of writing, trying spec scripts, doing all the things you're supposed to do, getting nibbles here and there, general meetings, and so on. Finally, through a friend of a friend of a friend, somehow got a script he'd written on a producer's desk, who said, "Oh, wow, this is really great. I can't make this, but there's an opening. We have an opening at Sony for a big tentpole movie. Did he want to take a crack at it?" And he did. He wound up working on this big Sony tentpole movie, writing, and suddenly was inundated with managers and agents and so on, who 1 week earlier would never have taken his call. I know a woman, but remember, it took him years to get that far. I know another woman, however, who came out from Texas, had written a spec script. She wanted to be a TV writer, written a spec script for a show that was moderately successful, but not a particularly chic credit. But it was a show she liked. She wrote a spec script. She came out, she got an apartment in Burbank because she'd heard of Burbank, and called the Warner Brothers switchboard, asked for the show. They connected her. The phone rang. The secretary who normally answered the phone happened to be away from the desk. The executive producer of the show just happened to be walking by when the phone rang and picked it up And she said, "Hey, I just wrote a spec script for your show. Would anybody over there be interested in reading it?" And he was so charmed by her and by the fact that she'd written a spec script for his show. He said, "Sure, bring it over." She said, "Where are you?" He said, 100 Pass Avenue. She said, "That's like 3 blocks from my apartment." She walked it over, handed it to him. He read it and hired her on the spot. She had been in town about a week or two. I have another friend recently, been working, won some contests, nibbles here and there, was about to give it up and go back east, go back home and do something else with her life. But she had applied for a writer's assistant job on a network show. And sure enough, the phone rang. They said, "Oh, the person we were going to hire dropped out. You were next on the list. Are you still interested?" She said, "Of course." She went to work on this big network show as a writer's assistant, and writer's assistants get to be in the writer's room. They get to know the writers and the producers, the executive producers. If they like you and you want to be a writer and you're showing talent, they often give you some assignments. And she got a story credit and then a co-screen teleplay credit, and then ultimately was put on staff on that show. That's how she did it. It took her years. I have another friend who recently, within the last 5 years, won the Nickel Fellowship, which is a major contest. And after years of near misses, he submitted something that his manager had told him, absolutely do not write this script. It has no commercial value. He went ahead and wrote it anyway because he was interested in the material. It won the Nickel Fellowship. It wound up getting made with some pretty big stars in it, and he's now his second feature just was shot, and he's writing other features for money now. Took him several years. I have another friend, former client, who came from nowhere, like me, had no connections in Hollywood whatsoever, worked incredibly hard, wanted to be a writer-director, more of a director really, but he wrote his own scripts and he worked incredibly hard on it, took notes from me and from other people, and finally got a short script in a condition where he could shoot it with very little money, the very little money that he had, but he did a great job on it. It was a really strong short film. It was accepted on a site called shortoftheweek.com, and within about 2 hours of it being posted, he was swamped with managers and agents wanting to represent him, and he from there went on and did a $500,000 feature, which was quite successful, and from there he's moved on. Now he's doing more mainstream, big budget features, writing and directing. And I have a friend who, my age roughly, who when he came out, again from middle America, nowhere, didn't know anybody, but he wrote a spec Golden Girls. That was one of the hot shows to write at the time. People don't write spec scripts for TV shows like that much anymore, but in those days you had to. So he wrote a spec Golden Girls, somehow got an agent, and then the agent got it, I guess, 2 Golden Girls. And the one rule of thumb is if you write a spec episode of a particular show, the one show that is never going to like it is that show. Other people may like it. So, for example, the spec MASH that I wrote got me work for years and years and years. It was such a strong script. People thought it was a produced episode of MASH. The only show that didn't like it was MASH. And yet this guy's script was so good that the producers of Golden Girls not only liked it, they bought it, they shot it, and he was nominated for an Emmy. And that was his break-in to the business. That never happens, but it happened. The point of all this is simply that no two stories are the same. Nobody gets anywhere the same way. Nobody starts out the same way. The one thing that they all have in common is this. They all were terrific scripts, or if it was a writer-director, a terrific little film. They were really, really good. That's the commonality, as I mentioned. Write great scripts and get eyeballs on them. Or if you're shooting your own material, shoot great films and get eyeballs on them. But it starts with that. That's the only thing they have in common. The route you take is your own, and you'll have to find it your own way. I can give you a few hints, and I'll try. You may have noticed if you've been watching some of my prior episodes, that screenwriters tend to be a bit grouchy, and it is in fact a community of kvetchers. Kvetching, of course, means complaining, but in a particularly Yiddish way that perhaps that's why Yiddish has been adopted over the years as sort of a second language of screenwriters and television writers. There's a reason why we tend to be grouchy. We do the heavy lifting in any production, and everybody knows we do the heavy lifting. And as a result, everyone is motivated to diminish our work, because if they diminish our work, they hope it makes their work seem more important, whether they're a director or an actor or a producer or an editor or whatever. They did great work with this lousy script. That is the basis for most of their approach. And so writers get cranky about that. We also know we have no control over the finished product. When we finish our work, everybody else's work begins. And because of that, we have no control over it. They can change anything. They can take us off the project, put somebody else on it. The only thing we do have some control over is assuming it's a Writers Guild signatory company. And I advise everybody, if possible, to only work for Writers Guild signatory companies and to become a member of the Writers Guild if you possibly can, because it gives you some protection. They can't take your name off of it, which they do when you're working outside the guild all the time, and did in the past for many years before there was a Writers Guild. At any rate, we have no control. We have no control over the finished product. That's very different from if you write a novel or a play, in which case you own the copyright to that work. And no one can change your work without your permission. Now, they don't have to publish your work, and they don't have to produce your play. They don't have to publish your novel or produce your play, but they can't change it. In our case, we are a work for hire. They're paying us. They can do anything they want with the work once we've completed it. And in fact, when you sell something to a big studio or production company, you have to sign a piece of paper, a legal document that says Paramount Pictures or whoever is the author of fill in the blank work. The author. That's how it's phrased. And you have to sign it. You can say, well, I'd never sign it, which is great, but then your work won't be produced. So we don't have that copyright protection. And so we're grouchy about that. Another reason we get grouchy is because if everything goes well and the film comes out great, somebody else is going to get the credit. The actors, the director, somebody else is going to get the credit. However, if it goes badly, we get the blame. I mentioned earlier, you've seen many times in reviews the writer and director, the actors and directors do what they can with this terrible script, but you have never ever read the director and the actors butchered a really great script. In a review, you'll never see that. We always get the blame. And as a result of this, we tend to be a bit crotchety. And here's some great screenwriters writing movies about screenwriters.
What's wrong with you?
Wrong? The scene's wrong. This was wrong.
The scene plays like a dream. Plays like Murat Sa'd. Who was that called me on the phone when he first read it, woke me up in the middle of the night, raving about the magical madhouse scene? Who was that? My upstairs maid, Eli?
Still
I don't need this aggravation.
That was The Stuntman, written by Richard Rush and Lawrence B. Marcus. Here's a scene from Hail Caesar, written by the Coen brothers.
I was kidnapped.
Well, technically, yes.
There's going to be a ransom.
I'd hardly call it a ransom.
Benedict there.
That's Benedict de Bonaventure. He wrote The House of Ahasuerus. Enormous hit. Made the studio millions of dollars. Did you see any of those millions of dollars, Ben?
I did not.
Dutch over there. Dutch Weistrong wrote all the way to Uruguay.
I wrote all the way pictures.
All successful. You see any of the profits, Dutch?
Ha!
All of us here are writers. The pictures originated with us. They're our ideas, but they're owned by the studio. I'm not saying only writers are being exploited. I mean, look at yourself, Baird.
Oh, well, the studio takes pretty good care of me.
What are you, a child?
I think what Herschel's trying to say is, just because the studio owns the means of production, Why should it be able to take the money, our money, the value created by our labor, and dole out what it pleases? That's not right. So no, I wouldn't call it ransom.
Payback.
Now, until quite recently, our study group had a narrow focus. We concentrated on getting communist content into motion pictures. Always in a sub-rosa way, of course. And we were pretty darn successful. You remember in Kerner's Corner? The town hall scene where the aldermen overturn the rotten election and make Gus the mayor.
Yeah.
Well, I like to think we've changed a few minds.
There have been more recent movies made about screenwriters. Mank was one. David Fincher directed. It was a big movie. Gary Oldman starred in it. And Trumbo was another one with Bryan Cranston about Dalton Trumbo. Mank was about Herman Mankiewicz, a great screenwriter from the 1930s and 40s. Trumbo was the story of Dalton Trumbo, who was a great screenwriter from the 40s and 50s. They were both pretty bad films. And in my opinion, the reason why they were so bad is because they were written from the perspective as if the screenwriters were important people who we should be interested in and admire on some level, instead of what they were probably really like. I'm sure if Herman Mankiewicz or Dalton Trumbo had written their own life story in a movie form, it would have been much more self-effacing and a much better film than either of those were. The movies I've just shown you have a much more jaundiced view of screenwriters, or jaundiced is probably the wrong word, it's more accurate. Charlie Kaufman, Richard Rush, and Lawrence Marcus, Coen brothers, and Michael Tolkien, who wrote The Player, all made movies about screenwriters in which those characters were interesting jerks, which is probably what most of us are. However, having said that, you have to resist the impulse in real life to be cynical and negative. If you let that seep into your work, it's only a matter of time before you're finished. Hollywood is a place for dreamers. If you don't think that your next script may turn out to be a great, great film, then you need to let somebody else try. Move aside and let somebody else do it. The reason I've survived for 45 years is, as crotchety as I can be, I still love writing and I love starting a new project, and I really do believe that maybe the next one will be really good. And every once in a while, even though I don't have ultimate control over it, every once in a while I'm working with people who get it and we're all in sync, and it does turn out to be really good work. That's important to remember as you launch into this business. Hollywood, in the end, is mostly a meritocracy. I think it's maybe the only, certainly one of the very few American industries that truly is free market. There is no federal government contracts, no federal grants, no federal subsidies, no federal tax breaks. There's some state tax breaks in certain states, but nothing federal, nor has there ever been, nor is there ever likely to be. That is not true of the defense industry, of agribusiness, of big tech, of big oil, of big pharma. All those industries are working the system from the federal government in order to make a profit or to make more profit. In the entertainment business, the audience decides what's successful, not an inside the beltway lobbyist. And the producers and the investors usually know within 24 hours after a movie is premiered or after a pilot has dropped or aired, they know whether they're going to get rich or lose their shirts. It's the Wild West. It's what the free market really is, not the stuff that they like to pretend the free market is while they're actually working the system. So because of that, somebody has to produce something shootable sooner or later, because nobody wants to lose their job or their investment. And if you're the person who can rewrite a script to make it shootable and hopefully profitable, you'll work. I cannot tell you how many times I have rewritten people with big credits, and big pedigrees and friends in high places, but their script wasn't shootable. So, gee, we need to get somebody quickly in here who can fix this mess. That's me. And because of that, there is an element of meritocracy in Hollywood that is admirable, that is not true in many other industries, which are based entirely on political infighting. Certainly there's political infighting in Hollywood, of course, but it's not entirely based on that. Sooner or later, somebody has to make good work, and good work is rewarded. I thought I'd take a minute also, since it's, at the time that I'm recording this, at least, it's a major issue, and that is talking about AI. I know nothing about AI on a technical level, but I do know this, that AI, at this moment at any rate, is a mediocrity machine. So will it replace screenwriters and television writers? It probably can replace some of them, but it is a mediocrity machine. It takes what's already been done and grinds it up into a different kind of pulp and spews it back out, but it's already been done. By definition, it's not original. AI can write a song in the style of Stephen Sondheim or a novel in the style of William Faulkner, but first there had to have been a Sondheim or a Faulkner for it to do that. Originality is still terribly important, and probably will become more important as AI begins to infiltrate the arts. And look at it this way, for long before AI, just since digital technology became so prevalent, you could make an exact copy of a Picasso, right, down to the brush strokes. You'd have to really examine it closely to know which one was the original and which one was a copy. But the original Picasso is still valuable. In fact, it's more valuable, and it's become exponentially more valuable because it can so easily be replicated, and therefore the original has more value. Broadway is doing great. It has its problems, but it's doing pretty darn well, breaking a lot of records, partly because each experience of going to a live theatrical presentation is unique and specific and original, and it isn't exactly the same as it was last night, and it's not the same as it will be next week. And people like that. Audiences respond to that. They want that. They desire it. Same is true of the concert business. So creative people should create, and that means create something new, something original. Write something that no one else ever has or ever could. To do that, as I've mentioned in earlier episodes, you have to think. There's no shortcut. You have to think. You have to have an original thought that only you could have had. And if you don't have an original thought and you can't come up with an original thought, then yeah, it might as well be written by AI. What else do you bring to the party? So it's a terribly important part of what we do. I have never known anyone in all my years in Hollywood who had talent and perseverance who did not have some measure of success. Well, let me explain, though, that you have to have both qualities. I've known people who had talent but no perseverance. They couldn't hang in there after the first couple of rejections and did not make it. And I've known plenty of people with perseverance but no talent. And no matter how many times they tried, they just weren't going to ever crack the code because they just didn't have enough talent to separate themselves from the pack. That's, I think, a pretty heartening thing, though. And I've been around 45 years, so I swear to you that's true. I have never known it. Never known anyone with talent and perseverance who did not succeed on some level. Now, let me hasten to add that doesn't mean all their Hollywood dreams came true. My Hollywood dreams never came true. So when I say success, I mean a kind of success. They got some traction in the business. So how do you know if you don't have talent? That's the brutalist question, but it's one that's lurking in the back of everyone's mind. When I was teaching, I never told anyone, stop doing this, you have no talent, even though there were many people who didn't have talent and probably should stop. I didn't feel like it was my place to, because I'm not I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not omniscient. I don't know. If I knew what would succeed all the time, I'd sell everything I write, and I don't. And likewise, I've read stuff that I thought was junk that got at least greenlit. Rarely turned into anything good, but they at least got greenlit. So I don't know everything. But usually the way to do it is, if you're taking a class, for example, and I advise people starting out to take a screenwriting class, and people are not responding to your work. They don't laugh at your jokes, or they laugh when it's not supposed to be a joke. If they're not responding well, after a while you start to get the message. And I would say, if after getting feedback on your work from several different sources, not one person or even two or three, but a number of sources are not responding, and preferably on several different scripts, not just on one script, because everybody can write a clinker, or even something that isn't necessarily bad but just isn't to the taste of the moment. So several people, several sources not responding on several different scripts. After a while, if no one is responding positively, the universe is telling you something. But really, it's something only the individual writer can make that decision. I don't ever want to tell somebody, you don't have any talent. I don't think that's appropriate for me. So let me talk about some specifics about breaking in, and start with this caveat. Everything specific I'm about to tell you will be obsolete within years, or even within weeks or months possibly. But there are some strategies that generally tend to work over time. I'll try to share at least some of my knowledge, and you can pick and choose what seems to work for you. The first thing is network, and I mean that in a verb. You have to network. Filmmaking is by definition communal. You're not going to be sitting in a garret by yourself writing screenplays and sliding them to someone who then goes and shoots them. It just doesn't work that way. It's communal. You have to have a lot of people to raise the money and a lot of people to make the actual film. So you need to find your community. And that community could be through a film school. It could be from the university you went to. There is a huge Harvard mafia in Hollywood now. There's Princeton. Emerson, out of a school out of Boston, has a large presence in Hollywood, Syracuse, and there are many, many others. So it could be through a school. It could be through a film school. It could even be through an open enrollment film school, which is what I did. Sherwood Oaks Experimental College, just a little place. If you could write a check for $100, you could take a class. There are some that are still that could be useful to you, but if it's costing you too much, then you need to be wary. Here in Los Angeles, I don't know about other places, but there are community colleges that have film classes that are terrific. My wife taught at LACC, LA City College, for many years, and it's the best kept secret in Hollywood. You can take film classes, almost anyone, I guess if you need a high school degree, I guess, but almost anyone can take classes for very little money. Most of the classes are quite good. Not all of them, but most of them are taught by people who are competent. And you're going to meet people. You get to use their equipment. You get to shoot films. And the roster of Hollywood professionals, star actors and directors and writers who went to LA City College is quite impressive. It's they call it the blue collar USC. But that's just one example. There are other community colleges and other open enrollment colleges that can be very, very useful to you in terms of both getting your feet wet, learning what works, what doesn't work, and meeting people who will become your friends and compatriots, and you'll move up together. Look for classes taught by professionals with more than one credit. There are a whole lot of people teaching who never really did it, and you want to be wary of them. They are teaching, they may be nice people, and they may even be good teachers, but they're teaching from books as opposed to experience. I will say without any fear, I would stay away from NYFA, New York Film Academy. I taught there for a while, and it is they charge a fortune for those classes, and it's nothing you're going to get there that you couldn't get at a community college film program if it was reasonably good. Some of the classes are very taught well by professionals, but many are not, and they have a huge influx of foreign students, which is a lovely thought. But many of those foreign students are really coming to LA at any rate. Maybe it's different in other franchises in New York or elsewhere, but they're coming to LA to party on daddy's money. And I met a lot of students there who were not serious about filmmaking. So be very careful about you should be careful about any private university anyway, university in quotes, with a huge tuition costs. The other thing to do in order to network is, where are you from? You're from somewhere. Find other people from that place. There's a huge Texas mafia in show business. There's a Georgia mafia. There's a Nebraska mafia. I don't know why that is, but a lot of people from Nebraska, I guess, don't want to be in Nebraska, so they wound up in show business. Historically, that's true. An enormous number of big stars come from Nebraska, and they sort of hang out. There's a North Carolina mafia. I will say, having come from Alabama, I have never found an Alabama mafia out here. Very, very few people from Alabama. There's more than there used to be, but still not many. If you're Canadian, that's a huge advantage. There's a lot of Canadian productions that you will be top of the list if you're good, because they need Canadian talent in the major positions, above the line positions, in order to qualify for certain tax breaks and so on. And a lot of stuff is shot in Canada because the exchange rate is so favorable. I don't know what it is at the moment, but it's often like 75 cents on the dollar. So just by shooting in Canada, they're saving a lot of money. So as a result, they're looking for a lot of Canadian writers for these projects in order to qualify for certain government stipulations. Likewise, if you have an EU card, if you're from Europe, or even if you have joint citizenship, but if you qualify for an EU card, that can be a huge advantage for productions that are being shot in Europe. If none of those things work for you, try joining a writers group. If you can't find a writers group, start a writers group. It's a great way to not only get your work critiqued. Sometimes the critiques are good, sometimes they're not, but at the very least, you're networking and you're meeting people who know people who know people who know people, and that's how it works. There are contests, and from the people I talk to, I work with a lot of younger writers, and people I'm talking to, contests have sort of, I guess, dimmed a bit in the business, but they never existed when I started out. And there are some good ones, and if you win one, or if you place highly in one of the more prestigious contests, it absolutely can jumpstart your career. The ones that are from people I talk to, the ones that have the most prestige are still the Nickel Fellowship, which is run at least in part by the Academy. I guess they've made a deal now with Blacklist that sort of maybe has taken some of the sheen off of the Nickel. But the Nickel Fellowship is technically not a contest, but if you win it, you get some money, and you get often a lot of good publicity. And those films that win, the scripts that win, often do become films. The Austin Film Festival has a screenwriting competition that's very prestigious. That's a big one. If you win that one, it can mean a lot. Script Pipeline, I have heard various things about. I know people who have won it and said it did them almost no good. Didn't hurt them, but it didn't open a lot of doors. But I know other people for whom it has been successful. Final Draft's Big Break is still a big contest. If you win it, it does mean something. And then, of course, there's the Blacklist, when anybody can submit a script to the Blacklist for money, of course, and get a critique. If you rate 8 or higher in their critiquing system, it can often open doors for you. I had a script a few years back that got an 8, and it didn't open any doors for myself or my partner who I was working with. But, for other people it has. There's a website that sort of has a pretty good overview of all the contests and so on. and it's called coverfly.com. So you might check that out. Now, the least important part of these contests, should you win one, is the money. It's nice to get a check for whatever it is, 5-10 grand, but that's really not the main purpose. What it functions as, those who win or place highly are often attract the attention of agents and managers who use those contests as a way to tell them what's good. It's a screening system for them. They don't know what's good, so maybe the contest will gives them a hint. Probably the most useful thing for you, though, personally, is that it gives you a talking point. It's a way to get your script read. Oh, this script was a semifinalist in Austin. This script got an 8 or a 9 in the blacklist. It gives you a leg up when you're trying to get your script read by someone. There are also writers' programs run by the studios and networks sometimes. They come and they go, and they're a little iffy, so you're going to have to check them out on your own. But Warner Brothers has had a program where they accept certain people into a workshop. You take classes and seminars and write scripts, and then they try to place you on their shows. It's primarily for underrepresented writers, and so because of all the diversity confusion as to what is now appropriate, the confusions over DEI programs, it's a little fuzzy now as to what's the status of those programs, but you should check them out. Warner Brothers has one, Disney has one, NBC has one or had one. I'm not sure about the status of all of these, and Nickelodeon I know has had one, and I think it still does. But they all function, and it's kind of like you submit work, you're accepted. If you're accepted, you get a leg up in trying to get staffed on one of their shows. So it can be very effective. I know many people, and in years past especially, who came up through the Warner Brothers system and got placed on Warner Brothers shows when they were finished with the workshop. And Disney as well, I know. NBC and Nickelodeon I don't know as well, but I'm sure they have worked for people. If they're still extant, I don't know that they are. You'll have to check that out. There are other sites too that have job openings, mostly for below-the-line jobs, but those below-the-line jobs can lead to contacts that can help you as you try to become a writer. One of them is called hollylist.com, and the other one is entertainmentcareers.net. And I think they cost some small amount of money per month. But I have heard from people, real live human beings, who have found work through those sites. So what else can you do? Well, here's some general tips. Find a mentor. Find someone who's more experienced, who likes your work, likes you, and ride their coattails. Learn from them and try to get hired by them, or they may help you get hired by other people. But find a mentor. And this is something people don't necessarily really think. People think, especially sensitive people and good writers usually are fairly sensitive, think they're bothering people. But the truth is people like being asked for advice, and they like being a mentor most of the time, if it's someone they like and who they think has talent. People like that. So that's one thing you can do. Here's another tip. My late partner was a journalist before he became a TV writer, and in his early journalistic career, he once interviewed Woody Allen, who was also just kind of getting started as a filmmaker. And he asked him at one point, and I listened to the tape, he had kept the tape, he asked him what advice he had for a young writer trying to break into the business, and Woody Allen, it was very serious, like most comedians when they're not on, they're very serious. He thought for a very long moment, and then he said, never slough anything off. And by that he meant, if you get an assignment, no matter what it is, it could be writing a handful of jokes, or writing a 1-page treatment, or writing a 5-page treatment, or writing a script, or whatever it might be. It might be a kid's show. It might be anything. If you're getting an assignment, don't slough it off. do your absolute best work, because you never know who's going to read it, and you never know how long the half-life will be for that script. And I've already told the story about Herman's Head, and it was written originally for ABC. We got paid. ABC didn't shoot it. 7 years later, a woman at Fox, when Fox was trying to get started as a network, remembered it, and that's the only reason it got in the air, and ran for 3 seasons on Fox. Never slough anything off. Do your best work on everything, no matter how lowly it may seem. Be nice to assistants when you are dealing with an assistant trying to get your work to someone they work for. Those assistants will be the boss one day. They may not be the boss of this particular company. They may be at a different company. But some of them won't be the boss of anything. But some of them are going to rise through the ranks and become powerful. And I worked with on a show called It's a Living, a sitcom. It was a mediocre sitcom. Okay. And it had PAs, like all shows do, and there was a young woman who was a PA. I remembered her a little bit. We were friendly. I don't remember having much of a relationship, but I guess I was nice to her, because 20 years later she was running a big movie. She was in charge of development of a major production company, and remembered me. And so my script got a welcome read there, and we had a very pleasant meeting. The film never took off, but never got made. But it was very heartening to see that 20 years later, this woman remembered that I had been nice to her when I didn't have to be, because I was her superior at that time. In fact, that's good advice. Be nice to everyone. When I was in the business of hiring writers, when I was a producer or story editor, and I was hiring people, or had at least a voice in who got hired, and I would talk to them, interview them, what I was thinking was, do I want to sit across the table at a rewrite session with this person for 6 months to 2 years? And if they're kind of difficult in any way, shape, or form, they better be incredibly talented, because otherwise the answer is no. I'll find somebody who I do want to be around, who's also talented. The cliche of the nasty, egocentric, chair-throwing monster who takes Hollywood by storm and gets all this power because of their arrogance and their meanness, that's mostly relegated to executives, to the executive ranks, because those people have no talent, and they know they have no talent, and they know they're not necessary to the process, and so they're trying to bully their way through with rage and bluster because they don't have talent. People who are in the writing business, especially, but even actors and directors, if you're difficult, word gets around, and people do not want to work with you. I've said to people, you better have a lot more talent than you've shown so far if you're going to talk to people like that. And it doesn't take long usually for it to catch up to them. Hollywood is a small town, in the sense of the entertainment industry. Not that many people make a living doing it. And people talk to other people, and people like to work with people they like. And so word gets around if you're problematic, and word gets around if you're easy to work with. For all you want to say about Hollywood, it's a weird place. Deals are made with handshakes. People make movies with friends on a handshake. I have many times worked on a big network show, and I'll be 6, 8, 9 months into working on it and getting paid every week. And my agent will call up and say, you really need to sign your contract. Oh, yeah, I forgot to. And so I'll sign a contract well after, whatever the legal limit was. But they've been paying me because it's a small town. And nobody wants to get a bad reputation, even studios most of the time. And jerks don't usually last. People who are really unpleasant generally don't last. Yeah, they do sometimes, have a quick ascension, but they also usually have a big fall. Being a jerk caught up with, Harvey Weinstein and Scott Rudin, and those guys were as powerful as anybody ever was. So if it can catch up to them, it can catch up to anybody. So be nice. That's all the advice I have. In the end, write great scripts and try to get people to read them. Coming up next, I'm going to talk about notes, how to give them and how to take them.